Yes, people, how's it all going? And welcome to the Five at the Back podcast. I'm Max, your host, and I'm joined today with Boddy, Coben, Tilly, and Albert. How's it going, boys?
Not bad, mate.
Good, mate.
Good stuff.
Very well.
Good stuff. Hope everyone's keeping well, hasn't been too affected by the negative weather of late. It's absolutely pissing it down here in the southeast. I don't suppose it's much nicer in Stockport or Leeds, is it, boys?
The microclimate in Hazelgrove is beautiful, mate.
It's not raining.
Yeah?
It's not raining, no.
Is it worth asking about Peterborough or is it
Of course it is.
Well, yeah.
Oh, have a day off. Yeah, it's overcast. No rain, a little bit of showers, but it's weirdly, it's actually not too bad for me. It's sort of after all the sun. It's nice to have a bit more cool weather. But we're not here to talk about the weather, are we? We're here to talk about football.
Well, that's it. And yeah, following on from last week and Project Restart, we've got the confirmed date again, 17th of June for the Premier League being back. Wonderful news. Full fixture list out now. And now the Championship's been given a date set to return June 20th. Tilly, I know you were delighted to hear that news.
Well, as I say delighted, I feel like it's obviously great to get more football back on the screens and back happening again, even if it is behind closed doors. It's a step in the right direction, but I can't help but feel that the Championship have jumped the gun a little bit and kind of just followed in the footsteps of what the Premier League have decided to do. And I had this discussion with Coben earlier where we were saying how the lower down the sort of tiers in England you get, the more difficult it becomes for them leagues to adapt to the current situation. And like Albert mentioned yesterday, that the League One is still in discussions as to whether they're going to resume, and it just feels to me like they're probably going to follow in the same footsteps of the Championship, who followed in the footsteps of the Premier League, and it's almost becoming a little bit forced where it doesn't perhaps need to be. But that's just my personal opinion. It's great to get things back.
I can tell you, obviously, supporting a League One team, it's the discussions that are going around in League One is there's issues such as, obviously, if you hold a game behind closed doors, obviously, which they'd have to if they are going to restart the league, the actual cost of putting a fixture on way surpasses, but it basically costs so much money that they would usually generate sort of money to be able to pay it off with via ticket sales and all these different other things that you associate with a football match going on as normal. Because there's none of that, it's making it so costly that it's actually not financially feasible within however many fixtures need to be played less. Putting on all these different games over this period of time, including things like travel costs and all these different things, is actually, it could bankrupt clubs because they literally just haven't got the money to be able to do these sort of things. It's all right for your Premier League teams. However, for a team like Peterborough, we're lucky to have a good chairman and sort of we're able to maintain the sort of running of the club through transfer sales. But I think
quite vocal about it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's really good, to be fair. He's on Twitter, Big D Mac, and he always will sort of provide like a bit of a scoop as to sort of what's going on with players. So he's good. I think it was Tranmere maybe where they were saying they basically sort of discussed all the finances and just said that actually in the long term it's probably not even possible, just because it literally costs so much and they haven't. Yeah, exactly. And it's sort
I've
of
had first-hand experience of that at non-league level. I mean, when I was working with Cheadle Town, and literally the fans are what makes you break even or make a profit on match day. That is what determines whether you're going to make money or not. And ultimately, it all comes down to the attendance. But there's things that people don't realise. I mean, at a non-league club, we had 3 floodlight stanchions on each side of the pitch, and that used to cost hundreds of pounds just to run for 90 minutes of football.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that you don't realise, these smaller clubs that have to foot the bill for. When you got like Man United bringing in millions and millions of pounds in commercial revenue from advertising deals, from merchandising, from that, these smaller clubs, like you say, don't have the same.
Well, you think of that. You think about the average wage of a player in that sort of division. Obviously, it's way different to sort of Premier League, even Championship for that matter. But those players are still getting the same wages. However, you think how much of their wages was through money was like funded through money generated from ticket sales. Peterborough, for example, we've gone from having maybe average 10,000 at a push, maybe 8, 9, somewhere in between that sort of region. You think they've got maybe half that season tickets, and then the other part of it is just literally ticket sales on the day. you've suddenly
What
lost
would it be?
all
20
that
quid a
money.
ticket? 20 quid a ticket?
Yeah, it's roughly 20 quid.
So 8,000 and 20 quid a ticket, that's like 160 grand, isn't it? It's a lot of money.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you got that, and I mean, if you've got TV money sort of covering it, then that's fine. But I mean, realistically, because of all the way the structuring's going to work, people going to want to watch like Peterborough versus Tranmere, for example, when you can literally watch Bayern, Dortmund, or whatever on the exact same day. It's not going to happen. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's trickle down effect, as you say. You've sort of seen League Two and below just sort of made the decision just to call it off outright and sort of null and void it. However, obviously, what happens higher up the chain remains to be seen, really.
But it's viewing figures again, like you said, because I mean, with the Women's Premier League, they've cancelled that, even though that's the pinnacle of the women's game. But that's because if you relate the number of viewers there to League One, they probably have fewer. I don't know the stats exactly, but I would imagine League One would have higher viewing figures than the Women's Premier League. And they've obviously already gone ahead and cancelled that because they know that it's financially not possible with the lack of viewership that they have. And like you say, it's going to be the same with League One, I think, Carl.
Think about some of the teams in the division as well. I know, well, Jack, you can probably speak about this, but Sunderland, they have such a big stadium, and in fairness, they do get a good turnout of fans, but financially, they're in trouble.
You get cheesy chips for a quid.
Jack, no, to be fair, you obviously a bit more switched on with it, but they're not in a good state if they don't go up, and sort of it's such uncharted waters, and it's sort of it's either way. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Teams that in
a bit of a devil's like advocate way, it's just like in a way I'm thinking, yeah, it's going to be hard for all these teams and that, but like, isn't it just hard for everyone? Do you know what I mean? Isn't everyone struggling?
It's definitely going to have more of an effect on anybody lower than the Premier League, though.
Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's sort of almost a given. It like in football and in wider life as well, like all businesses are struggling. So I think it's just about seeing how people adapt to it, really. It could have maybe, as you say, like more of a dependencies. Maybe clubs could look at, example, Albert, you were saying Peterborough. Could Peterborough look at maybe channeling games just for fans, and fans could maybe fund it in their own way?
There's no games to stream for them, though.
Pay for their own. What's that?
What was that?
There's no games to stream for them, though.
What, they're not playing Peterborough?
There won't be.
Well, it's all up in the air. It's all up in the air. But the problem is, I still don't think it will be able to match the sort of level of revenue required to be able to play the players, to be able to pay the players' wages. Jesus.
Unless the league.
Apologies, I thought League Two and non-league was cancelled. Is League One cancelled?
Yeah, no, League One's
still in debate.
It's up in the air. But the most recent thing they discussed was an average points per game sort of projected table, if you want to call it that, and sort of looking at what people have earned points-wise so far, and then looking to sort of go off that. However, controversially, my beloved Peterborough will be missing out despite being in the playoffs, and also Sunderland, who have done well.
They were missing out anyways.
And picked up form. They'll be missing out as well. So there's big implication. Like, Peterborough is sustainable as a club, so we're not too bad in that sense. But it's sort of Sunderland, where they were basically, if you've seen Sunderland till they died in the second series, they were talking about how much depends upon them going up this season.
Points per game doesn't allow for the factor of the standard of opposition you're playing. You could have 6 games left in the season against the 6 worst teams in that league, and therefore your points per game you would assume to be lower because you played stronger opposition for the games that you have played.
This is it. There's issues like Bury were obviously involved in the fixtures at the start of the season. They would have been literally a team. I think it was Wickham who would take our places within the playoffs despite us being in there. They would take that spot because they got 3 points or what have you for the abandoned fixture.
They were removed though. Them results were removed from the league. They got rid of the points and the games from any fixtures against Bury.
But there's some sort of complication with the calculation, and there's also, I think a fixture was postponed, so Coventry, who are currently top of the Championship, they have only played Wycombe once when they should have played twice. And basically, as a Peterborough fan, we're being hard done by, despite the fact that we're actually in the playoffs over teams that aren't. But yeah, it's interesting to see the sort of the effects lower down the leagues. Obviously, you've got the Bundesliga's back, you've got the Liga starting next week, and the Premier League the week after that. But it's sort of, for the sort of smaller teams around the world, it sort of it's interesting from that perspective as well, for sure.
And just almost alluding to what we were saying with Liverpool last week, not having a title for 30 years, and the sort of implications of them wanting to go out and celebrate and whatnot. It's similar really for Leeds, I suppose. They've been waiting so long for the Premier League to get back up there. Do you think? I mean, they're notorious for sort of falling short every year. Stop crying, Frank Lampard, everything. Do you think almost with the lack of fans there, they'll sort of ease the pressure and push on for that promotion in a more natural way? Or I think for me, they've been almost a bit of a wrecking machine this season. They've been so good. So
I'd like to see.
I imagine they'll pick back up.
We've all obviously got a connection to Leeds, having lived there for a period of our lives. I think it's like, as a club, and I mean, like, even
really disagrees.
Obviously, but no, the work under Bielsa they've done. I even think as a rival to Leeds, would you not agree with this? You'd rather have them in the Premier League, because then you have the derbies and the sort of like there's something there.
It'd be a good side and good change to things. But I'd rather they stay where they belong and rot in the Championship.
You know what? For me, Leeds.
I'd have Preston back up.
For me, Leeds, like it's really just win-win. Like, they go up, great. I like a good team in the Prem, Ellen Road on FIFA, etc. Enjoying all that. If they don't go up, brilliant. They've bottled it again. It's just win-win. Like,
I mean, Ellen Road on FIFA, you made a huge argument there, mate. I don't think I can disagree with that.
Do you know what I mean? How good would it be to go away there on a career mode, cold Tuesday night?
No, but I do think it's sort of, they're like a historic English club. I think they do deserve to be there. They've got such a loyal fan base. It's not to say that other teams in that sort of division don't, but obviously being a one club city.
But that fucking doesn't get you promoted. Having a good fan base doesn't get you promoted.
No, I think Preston and Forest have probably got better fan bases than Leeds. Maybe even West Brom.
That's deluded,
I mean, West Brom definitely have got a better fan base than Leeds.
No, they haven't.
Forest have got more history.
No, they don't.
No, they
don't.
West Brom have got one of the best set of fans in the country, mate.
No, they don't.
Shut up, mate.
West Brom have got really good fans.
When they Coburn tell him.
Coburn set
when
them
West Brom
straight.
came into Leeds, they were playing against Leeds in the game, and when their fans converged en masse and came down, they were incredible.
Birmingham fans not better than West Brom fans. The Zulus.
I don't think so. I mean,
we're going slightly off piece.
Some of those dummies are mad. I think in terms of Leeds' chances of coming up, like Max said, they have been a wrecking ball in the Championship. For the most part, whenever I've seen them play, they systematically dominate the teams they play against, regardless of the goal. So in terms of their play style, in terms of...
That's what happens when you spy on your opposition's tactics.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
have a day.
I mean, you got to advocate for that kind of behaviour if it's going to produce those kinds of results. Bielsa apologised, didn't he?
Yeah, well, not really.
I don't think he knows why he apologised.
He didn't apologise, he just showed us how he spies on people.
I loved it. That documentary, I think, fair play to Bielsa.
Do you know what? That documentary, they followed round the most goony set of Leeds fans I've ever seen.
Yeah, but they always do in them documentaries. Look at Sunderland Till I Die.
He'd done similar
things. That guy was going, get into him, Leeds! Go on, Leeds! Get into him, Leeds! Come on!
Yeah, but there's a tendency to that. It's like the guy from Sunderland on Sunderland.
I don't know. I thought he was.
The geezer drinking Foster's tinnies on Christmas Day. That was.
They went down.
Is that the guy with the sleeve?
None of them bought a drink, all just drinking in the street.
Yeah, he's got on his arm, hasn't he?
Mate, I had to go. I felt a bit sorry for Sunderland fans in that, because
I don't.
In the sense that they had to go They had Portsmouth in the playoff semis. That's not. How many times they probably played them about 6 times that season. In the cup
because
as well.
they played them
And then
in
they had
that
to go down
plastic
to
cup,
London
didn't they?
twice. That must have taken all the pounds out of their wallet, sure.
Yeah,
That's
of
a
course
lot.
they did. They
That's a
spent,
lot of
spent
expensive-
4
that's a lot
million
of
on Will
expensive-
Grigg.
There've got to be a few people bumping the train
Yeah, I
there.
think they'll be alright. They've been saving up because they get it that cheap up there, don't they? Everything's cheap when you go to Sunderland. So they could be saving up the last 10 years waiting for this playoff. I mean, I'm sure they thought they were going to be in the playoffs year before as well when they got relegated.
And lads,
Again.
just
Do
moving
we
on.
think Leeds are coming up? Just quickly, do you?
Yes.
I think they will this year.
I don't know. Unfortunately, they're in the best
think they will this
position,
year.
but I'd quite like to see Forest, Preston, and West Brom back up.
I just feel like they were too strong. Oh, where's Bloody gone? Never mind.
I think I'd like to see Leeds, West Brom, West Brom come up. Apart from that, I don't really care. I've got no real.
I do
Why
not
do you don't
want-
want Fulham back there?
I do not want West Brom up for the park.
You ever been to Craven Cottage?
Yeah, yeah.
It's meant to be one of the worst grounds, isn't it?
One of the worst grounds.
I like Craven Cottage.
I went
No,
to
that's
go
Stamford
to
Bridge,
the
mate.
market.
Stamford Bridge is the worst ground.
I like Craven Cottage.
Craven Cottage is diabolical. This
Okay,
is
so
nice.
Coben,
Right on the
correct me if I'm wrong.
water. Let's. What?
Yeah, I was just going to say, hasn't Craven Cottage got a neutral stand?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. It's weird.
I don't think it does anymore.
I went to go
I
watch
don't anymore.
Arsenal
I went there in
in
January.
the Fulham end, cheered every Arsenal goal. Absolutely no.
Yeah, you'll be all right for that, for sure. Boys, moving on just a little bit, sort of discussing, Project Restart and whatnot, and we've been speaking about the Bundesliga. One thing was particular interest to me of late is the fake crowd noise that is being sort of put into the stadiums, and debate for whether to do it or not, whether it adds to the atmosphere. I've come to the conclusion that I think it's almost subjective on a team basis. For example, as you mentioned last week, Tilly, and I saw the Dortmund game. It was quite interesting to see them sort of boo, like when the ref makes it. It's quite funny to sort of see the ref get booed by the stadium announcer and all that.
But is it in the spirit of things, though? It's funny, but is it in the spirit of things?
I mean, a cheap laugh here or there doesn't hurt anyone. But I don't
Apart
think
from the referee who's getting laughed at by 200 million people watching it live on TV.
Well, what's the change? He's not getting called a wanker. You know what I mean? But I've sort of thought about it, and I do quite like it, as Coben, you were saying last week, when you can hear the players talk, and you can hear the manager shouting on, and the cries when they score. But Boddy, what do you sort of think about crowd noise, and would you like to see it implemented in the Prem? For Newcastle, maybe specifically.
I don't. Obviously, the players won't be able to hear anything, but I don't think it would hurt having that option. I know when Amazon did their Amazon Prime edition of the Premier League, they had the option where you could turn off the commentators. So it's one of them really.
Sorry, that sun's coming out here in Hazel.
It's one of them where it hurts nobody if it's an option.
No, but as in being played into the stadium.
Oh no, definitely not. I don't think.
Not a fan of that.
I don't think that should happen at all. Because at the end of the day, like the players probably won't benefit from it, and it could just cause a distraction. I think.
You don't think it's getting routine though? They're used to hearing that sound. It would sound bizarre for them to be in a stadium that they're used to hearing 80,000 fans cheering to not hear a thing.
I disagree, mate. Just because I think, at the end of the day, the professionals, they shouldn't need a crowd to play well. Like
fake crowd as well.
They're showmen and they're entertainers, a lot of them.
Yeah, but they train all week. If you think, regardless of how many people are in that stadium, there's definitely more people watching at home, even on a normal normal basis.
Aren't they all training? They're all now training and playing matches back in the stadiums.
Yeah, a couple of clubs have done that.
I don't know what you guys think, but like for me, obviously a unique situation to be watching football in. Should we almost not relish the fact that there is no fans there for the time being? Like,
No,
just
absolutely
well,
not.
I think
rather than just stop being all
for me,
romantic football for the fans.
Yeah, but it is.
Just
for me.
Yeah,
for
but
me,
it's for fans, but they're still watching at home. What's the point of playing fake noise over the top? Can we not just enjoy watching it?
Part of me, this is just me as an individual, but part of watching football is the spectacle of the whole thing, and the crowd and the fans make such a big part of that. It's for me, it's almost as important as what's being played on the pitch. I'd say it's like a literally 50-50.
What crowd noise is as important as?
It's the atmosphere.
It's crowd noise. It's the atmosphere. Like, especially maybe not so much in England, but if you go abroad and other matches, you have like tifos and displays from all these different fans. It's sort of, it's something. It's it's not just the pure game of football. It's as much as what it does to the people. And as you say, it's like a romantic sort of way of talking about football. But that is what appeals to me as an individual.
I'm just looking at it as a purist of like the sport in general and just enjoying watching the sport being played on the pitch.
But on your point, Alb, it's the same when you come out of a game. If I come out of a ground having watched a game of football, the way the atmosphere's been will influence whether we won 1-0 or whatever. That was dead. It was boring. It was quiet. There was no engagement with what was going on the pitch. We won, but it was just rubbish football. And then you come out of other games and it's like we won 1-0 again, but it was absolutely bouncing behind them for 90 minutes. It was dead, and it's the same result.
100%. That's exactly for me. I sort of remember it with experiences. Tried watching some of these matches, and don't get me wrong, I have enjoyed some of it. Some of it's where it's like an entertaining game. However, when I feel like there's just such a big element of it missing whenever you watch a game behind closed doors. I think for me personally, I think the artificially generated sounds of fans isn't actually the worst idea. I think if it adds it, don't get me wrong, it might be a bit corny and it might not be sort of like what we're used to, but I think for me as an individual watching the behind closed doors games, I feel like there's an element missing, and so I feel like it sort of gives a little bit of, obviously it's nowhere near the same, you don't have the same reaction of fans just to whatever's going on live, but I think for the spectacle of it all, I actually don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world.
Well, for me, I think what's really interesting is what this question ultimately means for the broader question about whether a Premier League should have come back in the first place. My argument against the Premier League coming back was just that I didn't think the sporting integrity could be maintained carrying on a season previous to the coronavirus pandemic until now. And I think the fact that we're discussing potentially pumping in crowd noises into a stadium during a game really demonstrates that this continuity argument, this sporting integrity argument, as if this is going to be in any way reminiscent to what football was like before the pandemic, exactly the reason why I thought...
Well, it is, because they've been doing that at Spurs for the last 6 months.
Yeah, but Spurs arguably never played football in their entire
I've just had a thought.
Even ideology of whether or not we should pump fan noise into stadiums, whether we should have virtual fans, whether we should have cardboard cutouts in the stands, it really demonstrates to me the chalk and cheese nature between this kind of almost World Cup-esque game every 3 days, 3 games in 8 days format, and the Premier League as it was before. And trying to maintain, even in my mind, that the games coming up from the 17th onwards are part of the exact same season as the games that happened before the lockdown. It's nonsensical to me.
I agree.
It's almost like a little tournament where we're just playing arbitrarily to just decide where people are going to the next season. But for me, on an emotional level, as a fan, I can't connect everything that happened before the pandemic to what I anticipate seeing now.
But logistically as well, Coben, it's not just an emotional level, it's squads have changed. People are back from injuries. I mean, I know, Buddy, last week you talked all about Newcastle being one to watch because you've got a few players that are back and you're sort of at full strength. But yeah, to sort of be that disjointed from what happened before this pandemic to now, it's not just an emotional level.
It's every level
possible.
Kettle of fish, isn't it? Completely kettle of fish because every team's different. It almost seems like what's been written before has been completely ripped up, and they're just
100%
going off both again. So.
And there's bigger questions at play as well. So we were speaking earlier amongst ourselves about what we think the effect of no fans in the stadium is going to be on teams. And I personally think that technical teams that keep the ball well, rely less on the momentum and the emotion of the crowd, less on kind of particular individual moments of brilliance to turn an entire game, and work on a plan that's kind of more total over the full 90 minutes, will be better off. Teams like Man City that monopolise and dominate the ball, have great technical players, they're going to be better off. And then, generally speaking, what will happen is, you'll have a John Joe Shelby crunching tackle, wins the ball back, momentum changes, the fans get up, everyone's screaming, everyone's cheering, and they're pushing their team onwards. Now those technical teams, they'll be stroking the ball apart. When you make that tackle, there's going to be no crowds, no change of momentum, no emotion. They'll quickly dispatch of you, get the ball back, and just carry on doing what they're doing. That's my opinion. But I think if we do see stuff like that happening, again, it takes away from the fact that this is meant to be part of the same season as before the lockdown in the first place, because those kinds of emotions, those kind of fan effects on actual on-pitch performance, I think are going to be different in this period. And you can
the only thing I'd say, Coben,
they have to adjust, but I'm not so sure.
I was thinking about what you were saying, and part of me, we said before last week on the pod, and we were discussing whether, but do you mean there's a few grounds that sort of like the lower down the table in the Prem grounds where the atmosphere is so sort of, it's almost like tangible as an effect that it has on the players. It's an intimidation thing. You think of Anfield done the past few years and European nights, everyone says, oh, a special night under the lights at Anfield. But it's true. You've seen some of the best teams in the world get absolutely rattled at Anfield on a European night. So I think it's up and down the league. It's not specific to one team. So it's it's going to play a massive part regardless, but sort of the actual outcome itself, what will happen remains to be seen. I think either way, whatever happens, it's going to be strange. As you say, for me to be able to, I'm almost looking at the restart. It's not going to be held in the same regard as what happened beforehand, because
no, definitely not for me.
So different. But
like, for example, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they said it's quite a shame that we don't get to see a Premier League maybe the year before or the year before that, where the top two teams were close together. There were 2 or 3 points between them, they were jockeying for position, because then we could really see the extent to which their form is different because of the new format. Playing 3 games in 8 days, playing with no fans. Maybe if I'm right, the more technical teams like Manchester City versus kind of more fitness orientated and pressing orientated teams like Liverpool. Maybe that would actually, you'd be able to see the divergence in how those styles work under these conditions. Whereas now it's going to be pretty arbitrary because, first, second, third game, Liverpool wrap up the title, and that will kind of obfuscate anything that could be taken away from analysing their performances, because you could always argue they're on the beach. But if we had City and Liverpool really, really, really going at it, and you saw that, City style was more effective under these conditions, or Liverpool style was more effective under these conditions, that would be an interesting thing to see. But I think the fact that would even be possible in the first place really kind of hammers home my point about how Project Restart is really about starting something new for me. It's a return of football, but it's not the return of last season's Premier League.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, that was really nice, and good chat, lads. Rounds it off for the first half of the podcast. We're going to just take a short break now. Probably go for a piss and refill our beers. So stay tuned. We'll be back for part 2 in a second.
Gucci.
Are we? Is that right?
The stream's still live, boys. So just go and get a beer, go to the toilet, and come back as quick as you can.
Go.
Charlie going up, down. Is this live? Oh, I'm what? back.
Welcome back, boys.
Welcome back, everyone. That was it. That was a good break.
Nice and
How was everybody feeling? I feel refreshed. My drink was replenished. Life is good.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, Albert.
The pubs to open now.
Yeah. All good. Those would be the
I saw a photo, and there was that whole meme thing last week that was like my expectations, and then 2020. It was the expectation was like a pint of Guinness, and then the 2020 was was 4 tinnies of Guinness. Facts, innit? Facts. Never the same.
It's so weird socialising, and then just knowing you're not going to go out at all.
I know, it's so
We're all
dead.
speaking somewhere, and it's like 6 p.m, and you just know when it gets to a certain point, we're all just going to go back to our houses and go to sleep.
I know, it's a dying shame. Look forward to that. All coming back eventually.
One day. We'll have to do another live podcast from the pub the day it opens.
It'll have better Wi-Fi than mine.
Alright, lads. Next part of the podcast. Body, I know this will be a big one for you, but the Toon Takeover. I mean, it's been 10 weeks since the Premier League received the papers for the owners and directors test. What's going on there?
I don't even know if anybody knows or if the stories you hear are all just made up. So the latest is that Amanda Stabley, who is driving the consortium to the takeover, she's got a court case with Barclays that is due now, and apparently all her attention has shifted onto that court case. So the Premier League have dragged their feet for so long that even the people involved with the consortium can't even focus on it. It should have been done after 4 to 6 weeks, and we're still sat watching Qatar try to get involved with a lot of PR stunts. You're seeing letters ledged to the Premier League, and it's a bit messy. What's everybody else's thoughts from an outside point of view?
I just have to check before we have this discussion. Do we have to put our tinfoil hats on for this one, or is it? Is this actually happening? Because I mean, in the years before potential Newcastle takeovers, none of which has come to fruition. I feel like I'm getting a sense of deja vu. We've been here before. Is it?
Ongoing saga of Newcastle.
I even remember last year seeing Newcastle, a photo of Mbappe in a Newcastle shirt.
Yeah,
so
but
before we get too ahead of ourselves, I'm just sort of.
That's not Newcastle fans getting ahead of themselves. That's Newcastle fans taking the piss, mate. And sadly, a lot of everybody who see that doesn't know how to take sarcasm. But with the takeover situation, we're at a point now where it is with the Premier League owners and directors test, a part of what we've never been to. Mike Ashley's usually pulled the plug before we even get that far. But yeah, it would be very Newcastle-like to finally get to the last stage of a takeover just for the Premier League to say, go fuck yourselves. And yeah, it's pretty unfair on the fans right now. I know what it probably is that we've got to be extra patient, and it's probably going to be the longest owners and directors test ever because of morality issues, because of piracy issues. This is not some clean-cut consortium by any means, but yeah.
I also think there's probably bigger fish to fry.
I think
they're mainly just focused on getting the league going.
Exactly. I imagine the uproar amongst all the other 19 Premier League clubs to find out the Premier League have spent 4 to 6 weeks approving a Newcastle takeover, but they haven't even got a fixture list or returned it. Like, it would just be stupid. So potentially, maybe the like three or four of the weeks gone by has purely been focused on Project Restart, and since Project Restart has been completed essentially, apart from actually playing the games, the next part is probably to approve the Newcastle takeover. We just don't know what point it's at the minute. It could drag on for another few weeks.
I know you mentioned about it's kind of in the Premier League's hands and it's taking longer than it should, but one of the things that I think is really worth noting that you've missed out is the fact that it's a Saudi Arabian owner that wants to come in, and there've been objections to the takeover from the likes of Amnesty International and other organisations that are fighting for equal rights around the world, because they're concerned that this Saudi Arabian influence into the club may have repercussions. I mean, we all know that life in Saudi Arabia is very, very different to how it is out here in the UK and in a lot of sort of Western European countries. And I think that cannot be taken too lightly. Them objections are serious, and then that goes back to the directors and owners test you were talking about. What is the fit and proper persons test, and how does it actually look at these issues that could potentially be problems in the future? How does it do that?
It pretty much shows how the Premier League's owners and directors test. I think what the Premier League are worried about is how flawed their system is. The fact that
I'll add a point.
Let me just finish on this point while I'm here, Albert, rather than going into nostalgic memories.
I know this is a passionate one for you.
Yeah, but for what you've just said there, Tilly, is I think, yeah, there's a lot of morality issues. Amnesty International have been involved, but I think if it shows how bad the Premier League are with their rules, is that the chances of this being blocked for morality issues is probably not going to happen. The chances of it being blocked for piracy issues, on the other hand, is probably more than likely. It shows that the Premier League themselves probably value the murder of a journalist as not really that important, but streaming BN Sports on a dodgy box is probably a bit more important.
I've just done a little bit of digging there, Bods, as to actually the point behind that, and it says that Section F 5.1 in the owners and directors test, it states that having a criminal conviction, not necessarily a spent one, imposed by a court of the UK or a competent court of foreign jurisdiction prohibits you from ownership/directorship of a football club. However, there is very little to indicate that, say, potential human rights abuses will be taken into account. An added appendix of no offences in the handbook relates specifically to those around the game itself, such as ticket touting and that kind of thing, but there's nothing there that actually includes human rights abuses. Although I have seen that FIFA have since issued their own human rights policy.
I don't think FIFA are in any position to talk about human rights, seeing as they've hasn't people in Qatar who were building the stadiums died for the World Cup.
I don't know why I'm laughing at that, actually.
FIFA take bribery. I don't think FIFA have any morality.
Corruption.
Yeah,
Russia and Qatar for the last one.
I think what you're seeing on the media front of all the objections is the likes of Qatar. You've got a lot of geopolitical issues between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, to the point where Qatar probably don't want Saudi Arabia to get involved with the Premier League because beIN Sports will probably lose its rights. Saudi Arabia have already said that whatever beIN Sports offer for the Premier League rights will add an extra 50 million onto them. And to the Premier League, they probably stop caring about the piracy issues when they hear they can get an extra 50 million out of Saudi Arabia. At the end of the day, this is a lot of money, and I don't think the Premier League are stupid enough in the current financial climate of this pandemic to say no to something like that. Go on.
I think football's really having an identity crisis right now, which is one of the reasons why this is taking so long. So I'd say previous to the lockdown, for example, football's a sport where homosexual players feel like they can't come out because there's just no real possibility for the culture to adapt enough that they're going to be permissive and understanding. We have football clubs that are owned by Russian oligarchs. We already have clubs that are basically run by nation states. And so in the kind of profit versus morality question, football's always staunchly stood on the profit side, right? And relatively unashamedly done. We've talked about FIFA, we've talked about the FA in the past, and the kind of profit-seeking behaviour they do. We've talked about the economic motivations behind bringing back the Premier League and whether that was worthwhile against the potential safety implications. The fact that they shut down the Women's Premier League because it's just not financially viable, but they're bringing back the men's, shows, again, they're generally seeing moral question. But
this
now during the lockdown, when especially with the current events, even the ones that we spoke about briefly with our messaging, it's very much the time for companies to come out from an optics perspective and show that they care, right? So in the same way that you had Liverpool I think it was Liverpool had to walk back, furloughing a lot of their staff. You have to be shown as a company to be doing something that demonstrates that you care about the customers and the fans, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're in a time where I think under ordinary conditions in a normal situation, the takeover got approved just like PSG's takeover got approved, or just like Man City have got their takeover approved.
But that's back in the day, Coburn. The things, the whole media outlook on human rights as a general topic has changed since then. Everything is
human rights, but human rights. I think
specifically, I think 18 months ago, there hasn't been significant change in 18 months, but I think 18 months ago, when there was absolutely no prospect of the coronavirus pandemic, and there wasn't this hyper focus on this would have got passed through. Now, I acknowledge and I agree that our knowledge and our understanding and our position on human rights as a society has evolved over time since...
I think City, as an example, I think City that you mentioned, 2012, was it, or 2010 they got took over? That, in 2020, would be a completely different story.
I have a perspective of it, which is obviously being a non-Premier League fan. I have a perspective of like Premier League and also this top tier, the elite level of football. Realistically, with the television deal that came into the Premier League a few years ago, they sold their soul then. I think this takeover is obviously the Premier League is absolutely blows all the other leagues out of the water, which is why you've seen the prosperity of all the different teams, especially the English team in the Champions League in the past few years. This never would have happened a few years ago. So in a sense, this takeover of Newcastle is literally, they sold their soul. They've asked for this. This is literally the capitulation. I say the capitulation. This is the ultimate of what's happened. You're going to get a state-owned team essentially coming in that's just going to blow everybody out the water, but it's because they want a piece of that cake that is the Premier League.
Sorry, go on.
Go on, Max, go on. No, honestly, you go on.
I was going to say, when you look into money and you look into people with money that go and buy football clubs, like if you go through every transaction, you know, of high value that they make, there's going to be some sort of funding somewhere which will upset somebody about something.
Yeah.
Is it because it's a Saudi Arabian focus that maybe it's a bit more precedence?
So I think with this one, like if you're not aware of it, there's a sports term called sports washing, where it's where companies use sports as a sort of method to sort of funnel their money and sort of it to appear with the sort of positivity of it. So it's essentially like a dumping ground for finance for these companies, states, in the example of Newcastle, where there's so much money involved, they can put money into it and it will sort of doesn't look as bad, looks like it's for a positive cause, for an example. And I think this is a prime example of what it essentially is. You've seen, this is not a new sort of concept, example we've mentioned earlier, but we didn't say specifically. PSG, for example, PSG have had absolutely tons of money dumped into them over the past few years. And it's, don't get me wrong, I think for some people it's massively negative, and I think for people of smaller clubs it's fine, but there is also an acceptance of it of football, because you've seen World Cups down the past few years, you've seen other sorts of things where there's a backlash immediately, but over the years it just becomes accepted. And I think that I think with the Newcastle takeover, I think it's just part of what the game has become. Sadly, I say sadly, but I think people will move on from it. I mean, I don't know whether there'll be another takeover like it in the next few years, but it's all built up to this. When you look at takeovers like Chelsea, you look at takeovers like City down the years, I think ultimately it's been building up to this, and this is sort of the complete, almost the final stage of this evolution of the football, of the Premier League, and sort of the way it's gone.
It's almost becoming like a property market for the wealthiest 0.1% of individuals in the world. It's like, I'll buy this club and then in 10 years I'll sell it for more than I bought it for.
It's not even individuals anymore though, it's countries buying clubs. Like, it's...
Yeah. No, that's it. Well, I mean,
who's got the biggest stick in the
It's the
Middle
wealthy
East?
1%, it's the wealthiest top 0.1%, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, I was listening to a podcast earlier. I didn't realise this, but Wolves are owned by an investment firm.
Fosun.
I think it was said Fosun. That's it. And when they were bought for 30 mil, and they're now worth 400 mil.
Yeah,
well, Newcastle are technically owned by an investment firm. They're owned by MA Investments.
No, we're not.
Yeah. So
they are. They're owned by Mike Ashley Investments.
It's Mash Holdens.
the sport,
Unless
but
he's
whilst
changed the
it's
name
for
of
the
it.
fans who go on a day-to-day basis, the sport is for the fans. But for the people that own it, it's almost like, oh, look what I own this.
But it's
football
been
club.
that for
It's
it's
a
been that for so.
It's been
that, I think, as you
it's
say,
been that
ever since
before
the
City got
ever
bought.
since the Premier League.
It's been
Ever
that
since the Premier League,
ever
that's the
ever
way.
since Chelsea pretty much got bought, and that was the start of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
When you
Yeah,
look
exactly.
at all the
So-
money Chelsea started getting thrown at by Roman
Well, you
Abramovich.
can even look before that though. You can look at Jack Walker at Blackburn. He came in and he bought everyone, and then they won the league.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
well, no, this is it. This is my point. This is, I feel like, don't get me wrong,
But
go on.
say when the football and when the Premier League as well is like it's such a statement to own a football club, and when it has as many eyes on it as it does, it was only going to get out of control. You know, in terms, and then you look at.
It didn't have to get out of control, did it?
Well,
Because
it
Germany
does-
have got 50 plus one rule in to stop it
but you
getting
look
out.
at but the numbers that people that watch the Premier League though.
When you're that globally massive, you can't control
I
it.
think
Like,
it's
hard.
Can't control it.
Money-
Germany controlled it perfectly. They're only, I believe,
Yeah, but
Germany's
Ger-
three clubs in
culture's
the
different,
Bundesliga
though.
that are owned by investment firms. One of them is Wolfsburg, who are owned by VW, and that's because they were already owned by VW before the 50 plus 1 rule came in. I think Schalke might be another one. I can't remember off the top of my head,
But
I
Ger-
don't think there's only
German
Leipzig.
football.
German,
They're not even
culture's
Red Bull, are
different,
they?
yeah, but
German
It's an
football
anomaly.
culture is
German
different
football
though.
is an anomaly in terms of the rest
I
of the
don't think you
world.
can
I think
compare the
it
two
is.
cultures.
yeah, the
No,
Premier.
because the
I don't
MLS
think
is
so.
the other extent of it. The MLS is your franchise system in football, which is probably the only league in the world that has that kind of system. I don't know about Australia, actually. Maybe the Australian league similar, but yeah, the MLS is the same as the NFL. It's a franchise
Neither
system.
are on the same scale as the Premier League.
In the MLS, there's no relegation, no promotion.
Exactly. That's why the English football is the best in the world. It's a matic league structure, and that is why we're renowned for being the best league in the world.
I mean, I also think it's interesting because, I mean, I live in London. Large swathes of commercial and personal property in London are owned by Saudi and Qatari companies anyway. And there's not all of this uproar around them buying up large swathes of one of the biggest and most important financial cities.
Yeah,
in Europe.
skyscrapers and all that.
Yeah, they're buying skyscrapers, they're buying personal property, and then just leaving it there completely unused because it's a great investment. And there's not as much uproar surrounding that. And I think it's very much a situation where people are really worried about being seen to be a country that's showing approval to Saudi Arabian activities when we're already taking their money through loads of other channels anyway. So I don't understand why Newcastle is expected to not sell to a Saudi Arabian owner when pretty much every other company in the country, if they got given a massively beneficial financial offer from a Saudi Arabian company, would take it.
This is it.
The
This is
government
it.
themselves are selling arms to Saudi Arabia, so if it
this
goes
is
as
it.
high
With-
as that,
with-
then can you knock this deal back? Like, let's be honest,
I
the
agree.
government
Also,
themselves
I
have
think
said they
people
won't
want
get
that
involved.
Paragon of moral virtue when the rest of the companies in the UK don't
Well,
have to
this
do
is it. This is it. Like, obviously, with everything going on in the UK at the moment, I think it was even Wayne Rooney came out and said this, but he said about when there was the early stages of the pandemic, when they were talking about people taking wage cuts, everyone was saying, Wayne Rooney said Premier League footballers and obviously the top level of footballers are being scapegoated. They said you've got people that avoid paying tax and all these different people who are still earning the same amount of money, but then you had Premier League footballers saying, they should take wage cuts and all these different things. It's sort of, in a sense, footballers are often scapegoated because there's so much in the public eye and all these different things, which, again, like it's sort of, as you say, Coben, if you're going to hold them up for accountability for all these different things, you then need to look at the bigger picture. You actually need to think, besides the sport and it maybe out with the public eye, but all these sort of behind closed doors deals that are going on, you think actually, if you're going to, how can you be acceptant of one thing if you're going to sort of like flame another? So yeah, I completely agree. I think it's, as I say, this is my whole sort of standpoint of it. I think it's very hypocritical, and I think ultimately the Premier League don't have a leg to stand on because they asked for this. This is sort of, they knew what they got themselves into bed with when they sort of took on the Premier League deal or the TV rights deal, for example, and sort of became this massive worldwide sort of thing. I think this was ultimately bound to happen. So I think, don't get me wrong, for the other teams, I'm saying this is completely neutral for the Premier League. Maybe the top 6, if you can even call it that, with the competitiveness of all the other teams around it now, then maybe shaking their boots is going to sort of rock the boat a bit. But I ultimately think, so what? I think in a sense it would draw interest from around the world, and because literally looking at it from a business perspective, I think, do you know what, it's probably good. I think it's probably a good thing, and whilst, as I say, it will upset the history books and sort of the way things have stood and all these sort of things, like your top 4, your top 6, it's going to, as I say...
Do you think that's going to continue to grow, Albert? Do you think that top 4 that now we regard in the top 6 is going to become a top 8?
I think without a doubt. I think the table's split into 2 to the point where there is a top 10 where they fight for Europe and championships, and the bottom half, which you see now, like, you used to get maybe like 3 or 4 teams and they look stead on for relegation, whereas now from like 11th downwards, like anybody could be pulled down after a couple of games.
And then at the top of the table, it's sort of like we've seen the expansion, but you've seen like teams like Wolves, and they've completely upset the balance.
Leicester as well.
It's not upsetting the balance. It's actually the opposite. I know you use that term lightly, but it's not. It's making competitive balance that tight that you could go anywhere in the Premier League and you know you're going to have a game on your hands. And I think that ultimately is what is going to encourage more and more people to watch the league and the league to grow. Is because you don't know what's going to happen. Brighton could beat anybody on the day. City could beat anybody on the day. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's what makes a good league. Because people tune in.
That's one real criticism I'd say. I don't know of the Bundesliga, but just watching it, like how much better are Bayern than everybody else?
And the fact they almost hoover up every other.
They are better than every other team put together. They're just so much better, aren't they?
But if you look at the other 19 places in that division, the teams that have finished 2nd, 3rd and 4th have not been the same teams in 2 consecutive years for the last 25 years. But is that worse in a way, though? Would you rather see it that there was just one team dominant, but then a scrap for the rest?
Yeah,
like in the Premier League. The Premier League, there's probably like 3 or 4 normally winners. You could say, probably from the last 10 or so years, like you could look at. There's 3 or 4 winners, 5.
The one with Bayern is that they were already that big before the changes happened in the Bundesliga. So you can put as many restrictions and legislation surrounding transfer fees, wages, ownership as you want. But at the end of the day, any German kid playing football is going to want to play for Bayern Munich because of what they've done in the history. And you've seen that with the transfers. I mean, Albert, you said to me the other day about Hummels going. And Goetze as well as another example.
There's countless so many. In the past few years, I'm even thinking.
But do you think that's because Bayern have got more money, or do you think that's because the player wants to play for Bayern?
It's ultimately this is a prestigious thing. But I'll take this one just on Tilly's point. Yeah, you look at Bayern, and it's a sort of constant system. So I mean, I know that they're getting that Nubel, who's the goalkeeper for Schalke, who's meant to be top player. There's a guy called ARP. So it's like a constant. And in the past few, FM player. But in the past few years, there's been the likes of like Goretzka. There's been a few failed ones, such as like Sebastian Rudy. But
you'd argue Goetze was failed as well.
Well, yeah, you could argue. But my issue with it is the fact that Bayern do this thing where they sort of a year, 18 months before their contract runs out, they say, "Oh, we're interested." What they do, they let the player's contract run down, literally sign them on a free. And I think it's a
conveyor belt. It's a conveyor belt of top talent. We were just going through their squad the other day, weren't we? How many good young players do they have?
Incredible.
It's incredible.
They have a senior player, a transitional player, and just
for every position. For every single position.
Although they've missed out massive on Timo Werner, haven't they? They've missed out massively on Werner. I thought he'd have been one of the first that they'd got him for.
I don't think
Bayern paying
Werner doesn't fit Bayern's system. Really,
I don't think Bayern
they've got Lewandowski.
Strikers anyway.
They're not used to paying that.
For the most part, Bayern have constructed this incredible team, despite not having the financial resources of Premier League teams because of their position in the German market. They don't have to overpay to take players away. They don't have to overpay clubs to take German nationals in the same way that English clubs have to take English internationals. And additionally to that, they're in a situation where they have a very, very, very strong football and commercial team. They're very attractive. They corner the market. They're the best club in the country. And so they don't have to overpay for German players, and internationally, because they've got such a great footballing and commercial team, they get deals done for good prices. So even though they've got this incredible team, you've got players like David Alaba who would cost more than Timo Werner if they were to sell him now. They didn't buy him for more than that. They got players like Lewandowski who they got for free. They got, Thiago Alcantara was, one of the best in the world.
Oh, I love him. What a player.
Joshua Kimmich. All of these players. Can you name me a Bayern player in the first team who cost 50 mil plus?
Well, my point for this would be that as well, they're very astute in the transfer market, so they have there's the ice cream vans coming through for its weekly visit.
Can you just tell them to not come?
Where's
James Rodriguez
Premier League for free, didn't they?
Yeah, Bayern as well. They also got James Rodriguez and Coutinho in back-to-back seasons on astute loan deals. They are.
You can do that when you're at the top, though.
But it does stem back to the commercial side of things. But just historically, I mean, if you look at the actual spread of teams in the Bundesliga geographically, I think there are probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 at a push, teams on the east side of Germany that are in the Bundesliga. The rest of them are all southern and western Germany, and that stems back to wartime and after the war and what happened in Germany, obviously with both the world wars, and since the western side of the country has developed quicker than the eastern side did after the war, and that's why they had more money, that's why they became more successful, and that's why they're now in the position that they are now, in that they can buy players, or rather get players on a free, because people want to play for them, because they've always been successful. So it does step back to money, just not right now.
It ultimately leads to for me, it's a bit of a detriment to the league. As I say, I've been trying to get involved in the Bundesliga, but you can just see Bayern are so far ahead of everybody else, and it's a strength in depth that they have.
Albert, I'm going to mute you if you don't get that ice cream man to shut up.
Do you want me to go and get? I'll go and buy a wiki off of him, and hopefully.
If all the leagues were like the Bundesliga, I'd actually understand that argument for a European Super League. Like I can understand why you'd have a European Super League if all the leagues were like Germany or like Scotland, and it was just.
Did you say Italy as well? Because I didn't realise until today how many leagues Juventus have won in a row. It's a joke.
Ridiculous.
They're not top at the moment, are they?
They are. I think they are.
I think Lazio are top, aren't they?
Yeah, but is it?
I'm going to have a little check now, but they.
No, but I agree with you in general.
Is it not part of the game though, boys? Do we all remember? It must have been 5 or 6 years ago now when Dortmund played Bayern in the Champions League final.
Bayern Robben.
If anyone here says they were supporting Bayern Munich in that game, you're a liar.
Yeah, but
everyone loves
but you like Enker's Bayern, don't you?
Yeah, but everyone loves the underdog. Everyone loves the underdog.
No, the thing is though with Dortmund have got this sort of romanticism about them because they develop young players. However,
and the fan base is incredible.
I have a German
friend. Is one of the best grounds in the world.
I have a German friend, and they said to me, "I don't understand this whole thing, this romanticism with Dortmund. Dortmund are commercially, they still spend as much as a top club. They're, for whatever reason, be it the fans or what have you, there's literally people see them as this sort of like nothing do wrong club. But however, in Germany, they're not actually. The people see through it. I'm just a bit of a caveat. I've looked. Juventus are currently top of the Serie A by 1 point ahead of Lazio, and then there is a 8-point gap between Lazio and Inter. Inter on 54 points. So yeah, Lazio.
Napoli.
Ciro Immobile, Napoli are down in 6th.
Jesus.
Oh.
So yeah, but it just goes to show Juventus dominating again. Obviously, it's sort of these.
I hardly call it dominating, mate. They're 1 point clear at the top of the league. PSG won it in October. It's not the same level as in other countries. I think if you were to take the Serie A, or Calcio as it's now called, there are 6 teams there that I could list that you would say put them in a 16 group, it'd be pretty even.
I disagree. Juventus haven't won it for however many years, run it in a row. You boys are getting too much of the feed for this Calcio and
Wait. Back to the Bundesliga though, quickly. Even if Bayern did cop Timo Werner, do you think he's the right person to transition from Lewandowski into? I mean, he played some of his game on the wing, some in 10, some up front.
That's why I'm hoping they get Kane.
Yeah, same. I think Kane would be Kane, Haaland.
Do you know who I think would be a perfect fit at Bayern, but it would never happen. It would be Jimenez. I think Jimenez. Jimenez would be.
That's what I mean, like a classic number 9. But as we were sort of alluding to, going back to Timo Werner, big news this week from a number of sources. So it looked a long time like he was going to go to Liverpool. Obviously, previous relationship there with Klopp, and all the flirting was there. It looked like it was going to happen, but then this week it seems like Chelsea are going to be the leading candidate, and Liverpool are going to sort of go again and back Firmino.
And potentially, you pointed it out, Albert. They said that they've agreed a transfer fee, but there's nothing about what's happening with Morata. There's nothing about what's happening with the deal with the player.
It's tough to, but his release clause. I think he's in his last week, isn't it? When it needs to be spoke about or approached. It's 49.4 million release clause. Yeah.
So this is something that I was saying. Me and Tilly spoke about. I spoke about with a friend yesterday, who's a Chelsea fan as well. It does look likely. I mean, I've seen it on BBC, which for me as an individual, maybe not in the past few years, they've gone a bit more gossipy. But if you see it on BBC, I'm taking it as gospel. However, I think for me, it ultimately shows with this whole transfer market fascination that has become sort of so prevalent and sort of popular in today's society, that how much of it is just complete utter bollocks. It's sort of like there's all these what ifs. For me, from what I've heard about the deal, it literally seems that Chelsea are the first club to literally go in, meet the release clause, and be like, right, do you want to talk?
That's what they do.
Chelsea do their transfer business early, all the time.
But this is my skepticism, and sort of this is where I find transfer rumours a bit annoying because it's merely speculation. I mean, this Werner release clause will have been available for months, years. Do you know what I mean? All these clubs will have known about it, but Chelsea seemingly are the first ones to act upon it.
Seemingly, but 9 out of 10 stories that are the same are literally just speculation. Chelsea can afford to buy a striker because he's 50 million and they've got that in their budget. Chelsea need a striker, so they might go and try and sign a striker. Therefore, Timo Werner's nailed on.
I don't think it's speculation. I think it's happened. I think it's agreed.
For the story surrounding this transfer, as far as I can tell, the narrative that I've been privy to, and even people like David Ornstein, who I do take his word, 90% of the time.
Yeah. I believe it. Everything I've heard as well is sort
as far as I can
pointed to the fact that's really going on.
As far as I can see, what's happened is Liverpool made contact with the player. They had some sort of verbal agreement on personal terms, and Timo Werner expressed a desire to go to Liverpool. Now, Liverpool weren't willing to meet his release clause and were instead trying to negotiate either with him to leverage the club into lowering that price, or if he wasn't willing to do that, to then go into negotiations with the club to try and lower that price. During this process, Chelsea have let their interest be known, and they've explained to the club that they are willing to meet that release clause. So the club have turned around to Timo Werner and said, okay, unless Liverpool are willing to meet that valuation, we think you should be talking to Chelsea as well. And generally speaking, those negotiations, they've heard positive sounds. And that's the reason why there's the expectation that transfer is going to happen over time. So I think it really is, it's just about the level of commitment that Liverpool had to transfer. I just don't think that in terms of the valuation, when you're a team that's just won the league or is just about to win the league by such a significant points total, and the fact that Firmino's only scoring Lacazette level goals hasn't actually stopped you from doing that, why would you then commit a ludicrous amount of money to a striker that you feel, from your perspective, you don't necessarily need?
That was my next point to Tilly. Do Liverpool really need Timo Werner?
I'm not having this Firmino slander. I honestly think, for me,
I'm not slandering him. I'm just saying.
No, I know. But you mentioned his goal was for me.
No, but if you don't need him to score 30 goals, then you don't need him to score 30
This
goals.
is true. I also had this discussion with a mate. I don't think Werner fits into Liverpool's system realistically.
But I think, Max, to answer your question of do they actually need him, no is the obvious answer for that. No, they don't. But
Liverpool.
Football, certainly the Premier League now has become a game of if these players are available, and City have been the ones that have been started this really. If somebody's available but we don't need him, let's sign him so no one else can have him. And then if he becomes a flop, we'll ship him on to Spain next year.
So that's the thing.
So
that's what Arsenal need to do a bit more. You buy someone and you
That's
sell
what
them.
Chelsea are the best at. Chelsea players essentially just have this lone army of players.
I swear you've still got Marco Marion on your books.
He's gone to Red Star Belgrade.
I'll tell you what, mate. Next best midfielder in the world, that kid. I'm telling you.
I've got, when I looked at it a couple of years ago, it was like, look at Chelsea loaning out all these players like Michael Hector to Reading, and you'd be like, what the fuck's he doing at Chelsea? But then I think they made something like 40 million from loans.
Is he the one who went? Is Hector the one who's at Leverkusen?
They make so much money from it. They're just.
It's literally.
It also got them the transfer.
They are such a well-run club.
They're the best example of
in terms of loaning transfers. They are such a well-run club.
Academies and loan systems in world football.
They're self-sufficient in that. When you look at Arsenal and how our sort of shortcomings we've had, Coburn. I mean, we won't bore that. You know what I mean? It's just.
If you look at
Chelsea have this.
If you look at our net spend over the last 5 years or over the last 8 years, we're up there with anyone. And the reason why Liverpool is so strong isn't just because, and the reason why City are so strong isn't just because they buy well, it's because they also sell well, right? And I think, Arsenal have been guilty of not taking a longer term view. So we don't buy players unless we actually have a direct need for them in that moment. I don't think we've done enough medium and long term planning with our overall recruitment strategy, with our financial strategy, with our commercial strategy. But I do think that teams like Liverpool, more impressive than them buying players like Van Dijk and Alisson, is their ability.
They're selling Dominic Solanke for 20 million.
Yeah, some of the sales they've done have been absolutely incredible, and that's really able to something happening.
Sorry to interrupt you, Coburn.
Go on then, Albert.
The Poundland Wi-Fi is making another appearance. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've seen the other day Jordan Ive, who they bought for something.
Wow!
He's going on a free, isn't he? He's leaving on a free.
Mate,
they paid like 10+ million for him.
Their business has always been great.
Who's that?
Jordan Ive is leaving Bournemouth on a free after they bought him for 10+ million.
Yeah, and he's not going to finish the season.
Liverpool sold Dominic Solanke to Bournemouth for 19 million. They sold Jordan Ive to them for 16 million, and they sold Brad Smith for 15 million.
How about this, guys? We let a guy go on a free.
Criminal.
How about this, guys? We let a guy go on a free and then bought him back for 90 million pounds. No, I think if you want to talk about who does the worst in the transfer market, I think we get the.
Let's not talk about the black cloud that is Sanchez at the moment as well.
Yeah, still on 400 grand a week, still on the books, and doesn't ever.
I was saying to Coburn when we were on the phone the other day, if he turns up back at Old Trafford, he's going to be walking around. People are just going to be giving him dirty looks and that.
I'd pay him off. I'd just pay off the rest of his contract and say you're done.
United have that money as well.
Is that it? 400 bags a week?
I thought it was
350,000.
I thought it was 450, but it's
I thought with
Pogba's highest paid on 380, I think.
I thought with add-ons could be up to 500 grand a week.
I haven't seen that.
If he gets the appearance money and all of that, if he actually plays that week, gets the appearance fee.
Tell you what, boys, we've got this resource called Google available to us.
Yeah, Google often wrong.
At Man United. It is often wrong, but it also gives us a bit of an idea. That's his net worth.
26 million a year.
It's 26. In 2018, that was as well.
That's insane.
Boys, just whilst we're mentioning the power of Google,
216 grand a month.
It's 390. Just quickly, £391,000 a week. with an extra £75,000 for every game, and an
boys,
annual £1.1 million signing on fee.
You're reading that on sportsjoe.ie, aren't you?
Yeah.
As good as
Well, yeah, 400 grand a week. He's on.
as good as this Google. Sorry, Albert, you can.
I'm just going to throw this in. It's nothing massive, but whilst we were on the topic of Google, I have Googled how many times.
Let's guess. Don't tell us. Let's guess. Let's go around and guess.
Okay, how many league titles have they won in a row? Everyone have a guess.
In a row.
Buddy.
Since when?
I'm not saying since when.
They
in a
had,
row.
Away, but you have to have
In
a
a
guess
row.
how many in
they
a
had
row
that
they currently
season
are.
where they got
Alright.
relegated or something though, didn't they?
8.
I'm
There
going
you
to
go.
go 6.
I'm just gonna give it away. Yeah, they've won 8 in a row. 8 titles in a row. And I'm sorry, but this is a top European league. If we're talking like this.
Well, you
This
see
is an
Inter Milan
absolute
splashing the
domination.
money, you wonder
They
why.
love the Scudetto there. Is that when you win everything? Scudetto.
It is the fucking Scottish Premier League, mate.
And do you know what? What a wonderful note to leave on.
Yeah.
To finish on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
who needs the Serie A when you have the SPL?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Eduard will do it.
Guys,
Eduard will do it.
Real pleasure. Real pleasure. to
5,
talk
3,
through
4,
things.
5, 4.
Real
Yes,
pleasure
boys.
to talk through things today.
Enjoyable as
Project
always.
Restart, Championship return, Newcastle Takeover, transfer talk, Timo Werner to Chelsea. I mean, it's all happening at the moment, and yeah, we'll hope to sort of keep coming back with more podcasts, updating you on the process of Project Restart, and eventually getting back to talking about some real football when it comes down to it.
What do you mean we hope we come back with more
Yeah, it's
podcasts?
coming
I'll be here
back.
next week.
Well, you never know what might happen.
How many weeks till the Premier League returns? What's the date today?
2 more weeks.
10 days,
2
mate.
more weeks. So I guess next week we can probably have a bit of a prediction what we think's going to happen, and then the one after that
We can
we'll
even
have
look
some
at a team of the
football
season
actually
coming
talk
through.
about.
We can see what the
Look,
viewers want to see.
listen,
Obviously, if you're watching this,
listen,
get involved in the comment
listen,
section down
the
below.
po- the
Let us
possi-
know what you want us to talk
Yeah,
about.
the live chat is quiet.
Possibilities are endless. The possibilities are endless. Yeah, if there's something you'd like us to talk about, if there's something you want to get in touch with, get in touch. Get in touch. Suggest
You
things.
smash that live. You smash
that like
You
button.
better smash it. Click the notification bell so you know.
Guys, we're going to do a big giveaway next week. If we hit 100,000 likes on the video, we're going to be giving away a Porsche Cayenne, brand new, top of the range.
I appreciate
We're not.
and read every single one of your comments. Coming in.
Wouldn't take you long.
And thank you for the support of the 34 viewers we had on the first video last week.
What the fuck is this? I was meant to sum it off. What's going on here? Everyone's just piping in with all sorts. I'll let you do it next week then, should I? Fucking hell.
Ciao, arrivederci.
Right, like, comment and subscribe. Tell your friends.